Hey everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Compete, the show about the news, gossip, and tactics of competitive business strategy. I'm your host, Adam McQueen. Joining with me, as always, is the guy at Klue that uses Klue, Hunter Sones. Hunter, you've had a busy day today.
I have had a busy day today.
We'll get into that part later. Stoked to have you here as always. But first of all, we've got a very, very, very special guest.
3 varies.
I think that's the most varies I've given for a guest so far. He is the CTO at Klue. He is the co-founder at Klue. It is none other than Sarathy Naicker. Sarathy, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. My first time on Coffee and Compete.
This might be the first time having you on any of our video content. Grayson's going to sort out your appearance fee after the fact. That's been the big sticking point over the last few years of getting GSAR into our content. But I'm super stoked to have you on today.
I hide myself well in Klue.
And for those of you that think, how did GSAR probably got forced to get on here, dragged on here? GSAR's actually been walking around the office with a camera in my face multiple times, a lot more than you'd expect the content person to be filming them. I've been at my desk, I turn around, GSAR's got the camera in my face, say something, do this, do that. So this is actually the roles are reversed for the first time, which shouldn't pan out that way.
I was trying to make a video vlog for the first time ever and that was the one time you caught me, walking around with the camera in my hand.
GSAR said, CTO is great, but I'm going to go for CVO, Chief Videographer Officer.
All right, should we get into what we came here for? What's brewing in the world of compete? Hunty, first things first. Who's winning and who's losing?
All right, so we've got AI companies who are trying to differentiate on product who are losing as the LLM market is heading towards a zero margin business. Okay, so firstly, Aidan Gomez, CEO of Cohere. It's one of the well-known LLMs. Shout out to Canadian companies out there. So he recently appeared on a podcast where he's basically sharing his perspective on the profitability of the LLM and sort of like the foundational model AI industry. So he shared about how companies like OpenAI, Antrhopic, Google, they are basically price dumping. They're coming in and basically giving access to their models for very inexpensive compared to how much they have to pay to run these models. And they're kind of giving away these models for free to a certain degree. Essentially, these AI models, they're losing a lot of money. And you can kind of see why. There's not a whole lot of differentiation right off of, the get-go. It's kind of difficult to tell what's so different about these models. And so they have to compete on price to a certain degree. This is, in a commoditized market, driving down the prices of how much they can charge for access to these LLMs. And so we've been thinking through this at Klue, how should LLMs think about differentiating and who's doing it well and who's maybe falling behind there? Okay,
so the first part here, there's a couple components of this that we're gonna get into, but the first part, Gisa, I wanna flip to you, is it kind of sounds like the competitive dynamics here is this race to gobble up market share ahead of profitability. Is that sort of like the dynamics you're seeing with this?
To me, there's actually two aspects to this. One is if you look at the LLM market today, the most valuable commodity in the LLM market is actually data to train the models, to continuously train the data. And this data has to be high signal, low noise, and there is an enormous amount of effort put into cleaning the data and making sure it is high quality and all this kind of stuff. And by essentially making it free for use, the strategy is really to gain data based on usage, right? So that's what is driving them to expand the footprint in the market. So a lot of these players will probably disappear if they don't have usage, right? And if you think about who's going to get the usage, it's going to be based on whoever the first mover is will gain most of the following initially. And so the second thing is, the second aspect is gaining market breadth because all of these LLMs are trying to be general purpose LLMs. And that means trying to fit the need in many markets, many geos. And so in order to do that quickly, they have to be low price, right? They can't put price as a barrier. So they're all trying to be free, effectively free. And like the wise adage says, if you don't know how they're making money, it's they're making off of you, right? I don't know if I paraphrased that correctly, but you are the product. If you don't know what the product is, you are the product.
So I'm curious about this because I remember reading, years ago before I even got into the world of compete around different types of network effects. So network effects were like this big thing. Everyone used to talk about them. I'm sure they still do. But even before the world of LLMs, people would talk about data network effects. So the idea that, Google has this kind of defensibility to it because every time someone makes a Google search, Google gets 0.00001% better, but when you've got billions of people making Google searches every single day, the platform actually gets better. And it seems like there's a bit of an analogy here. The more people who are using these like general purpose LLMs, they get slightly better. Do you think that there is kind of like a winner takes all for the general purpose LLM, or
it
how
might
do you think
be,
about that?
but my sense of it is there are so many deep-pocketed players in here, at least 3, 4. That I can see. They don't need to be the absolute top dog to actually make meaningful inroads in here. So I think it's going to be a combination of market grab plus technology evolution. So the players who do one or the other may eventually win. But it's got to be useful for people, right, at the end of the day. I would argue LLMs today are still at the sort of user, the consumer level. They're still very much a replacement for search. It's a smarter search. It can talk back to you, and you can do some stuff with it that you can't do with traditional search. But it's still seeking a killer use case, if you will, and that's going to come at the application layer. Other vendors are going to incorporate these things to build compelling applications with that are polished out of the box and don't require endless amounts of prompt smithing to actually get your answer. And I think there's going to be a tiredness with repeatedly asking the LLM in the best possible way to get the right output, right? That already is an issue. And so today it resembles somewhat of you need to be a prompt developer in order to engage with these things. And that's also the hallmark of what I call invisible differentiation, because it's so hard to get into the, why one LLM is better than the other, because you have to almost go into research mode to try to figure out if an LLM is suitable for you. And average consumers are not going to do that level of research, right? And so they won't get into it. And so this is why I think there is a powerful undercurrent is giving it away almost for free, so you can do this land grab and then just dominate on the basis of your brand.
This is like, Gisar's a natural at this. He's kind of gone to the segue to the second part of this story here, which is around this like application layer, which is where this story actually began internally in Klue, sparked a really good discussion on Slack in Klue, which is why we're actually covering this story. So Hunter, what's going on in this application layer and how does that pertain to some of the brand components as well that Gisar kind of touched on?
Sure. Okay. So when we're talking about this idea of the killer app, okay, so maybe search is like the early killer app, but one of the other places that has kind of been identified as a big pain point that can be solved through, LLMs and generative AI is customer support. So customer support right now it's very expensive. You have to hire a lot of people. Sometimes it's very difficult to scale and you end up having frustrated customers who are just trying to get their problem solved. So Antrhopic comes out a little while ago. They're one of those, foundational LLMs. And they say, hey, you know what? We're going to start moving into the application layer. So they're starting to vertically integrate, going uphill there. And so they are starting to put together this developer console to help with building applications for customer support. And you see tons of different customer support companies right now starting to, or maybe not just starting to, they've been doing it for a few years, but pushing really hard into AI. And so I think that it's really fascinating to see some of these LLMs, they're trying to differentiate not just at the foundational layer, hey, we've got better AI, which is kind of the invisible differentiation that you're talking about, but they're trying to differentiate by having an application that's a very clear differentiator. It's maybe a bit more defensible too, because once you've got someone who's using that application, it's higher switching costs, and then you can maybe capture more profit that way. So that's one of the ways that we see LLMs starting to differentiate through product. But we also see this in a few different areas as well. So OpenAI, they're also starting to move into the search space. So they're coming out with, I think it's called Search GPT or OpenAI Search, something like that. And so there's a few different ways that these companies are trying to differentiate moving into the application layer.
So Jisar, this is where you came in with that sort of comment on invisible differentiation, the power of brand. What's your take on how these companies are competing when it comes to these application layers, but then also like where does brand fit into all of this when folks might not be able to see the nuanced differences between each product right now?
So I think this is a hallmark of what I call invisible differentiation is a hallmark of mature markets where many players have copied each other's features or things like this. LLMs are not a mature market. They're a fast evolving, fast-paced, growing market, but I don't think they're a mature market. But at this early stage of the game, they have kind of fallen into this trap of what is your differentiation from the other guy? Because of the nature of prompting-based engagement with these platforms. So what sets up the invisible differentiation there is the fact that the whole engagement model is based on asking it a question and then getting a response back. And all the players are able to do roughly the same thing, right? So superficially, the optics of it is you basically engage in the same way and you get the same type of, results. In order to actually truly know if one is better than the other, you have to either rely on some kind of a third party doing the analysis for you, or you go and use it in anger on a real problem, right? And then you learn for yourself, oh yeah, it's not doing that great. I won't pick that. But the average consumer is not going to go that deep before they pick one or the other. Right? They're going to rely on their friends, what somebody said on a review site, or what I call the brand. The brand is kind of like Ansys, it's the proxy for all of the other stuff I was describing. You don't need to do any research. The brand kind of is so good that you have confidence that vast numbers of other people are using it. They can all be wrong, right? And so you pick the solution based on the power of the brand. So to me, this is like a reflection of this early stage market still has brand as the thing that drives it, right, in these early days.
Which of these companies have the strongest brand? Is it the first mover that is kind of dominating this right now since it is so early days? That is that first name you think of is that first mover? And maybe in other cases we've seen, or maybe it's this case, when does the pendulum swing a little bit that it isn't just the first company you think of, or brand isn't the predominant moat you have?
I think OpenAI still has the cachet as the leading brand in this space because of the first mover advantage. They've always been the ones revving it quickly and introducing new features, and the other players are basically playing catch up. Maybe they may be doing certain elements better, but we don't know the definitive truth on that, right? It's hard to know. Because unless you do the research for your specific use case, you don't know that it's actually better. So given that, I think that advantage will probably persist with OpenAI having the upper hand for a little while. What will change it though is somebody coming out with something that is materially better and provably better. Meta is trying to get an edge by making it, it's an open model, or at least they claim it's an open model. And the accessibility is much higher because of that. And the use cases for which it may be used will be broader as a result of it being an open model. And so I think the game there, what they're trying to bet on is if they are so pervasive that they're everywhere, then gaining the market edge is that much easier, right? Once they're everywhere. So adoption, I think, is the key that everybody is driving towards. Adoption is number one in my mind. And the second thing is gaining data as a result. gaining good data.
Don't you love that we have our CTO on here and the first thing he said was brand was the big differentiator? That's the whole reason we actually got GSAR on, was just so we have that on tape, that anytime that comes up, that he's like, marketing matters most. That's what I've taken from our conversation so far.
And then Katie's going to come in, our VP of marketing, and say, you know what? It's all about data.
Okay, I got another question. Either of you can take it on here. So we mentioned at the start, big companies price dumping. That makes it really hard for smaller companies to compete in this space. If you woke up tomorrow and you were part of maybe a fringe competitor, a smaller competitor in this space, what would you be doing? What were some of the things you'd be thinking about to crack this market right now? Or is it just it's too hard to enter this?
I would be like Apple, think different, right? Don't do all the same stuff other guys are doing. They're already paving a road there. You pave a new road. That's what I would focus on. I think there's lots of problems to unpack here, right?
Your question was, okay, you're a new upstart in the LLM space. How do you differentiate? That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, what would you do in response to some of the things we've kind of talked about as what's happening, what's playing out right now?
So I have a 3-step process for this. First, hire GSAR. Because he's got some good stuff in there. You know what? And then the second and third, I would actually say, like, it's very aligned to what you're talking about. Find a niche data source that you can control and optimize, and then kind of make that the foundation of your business. And then third step is build the application layer that's completely optimized for using that set of data. So let's say that you're in financial services. Okay, step 1, hire GSAR. Done. Step 2.
You think they could afford him?
Probably not, but you're gonna need a lot of money if you're gonna build an LLM, so you might as well go for this guy first. But step 2, start finding financial services data that is unique, that it's focused around a central purpose, right? And then third, find the people who would normally be going and sourcing through that data themselves, and build an LLM-powered application that uses that data in a really unique way to solve a problem for them. So I think that those are maybe some areas. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for upstart LLMs and the people building foundational models to compete with some of the existing players because of how much money they've raised and how much money you have to put into H100s and like all of the NVIDIA chips to be able to power these things. But I think that there's still a lot of power in being able to maybe use an open source LLM, be able to train it on a very unique set of data and then build an application on top of that.
Well, GSAR, thank you for your debut appearance. This is awesome. Again, Grayson sorting out appearance fees, all of that stuff. Stoked on this, and this won't be your last time, promise?
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'll be back.
In the words of GSAR Schwarzenegger, he will be back on the show. Thank you so much. And then Hunty, let's get into some of the other stuff that you've been working on today. Before we do so, new roast in the community. We have a couple events, a couple shows, some stuff that's happening in the Compete Network. First up, Compete Week is happening, Klue's flagship event, our annual event. There's also an in-person element, October 28th, 29th, and 30th. I believe I got the dates correct. I should, because I've been running a lot of emails on it. So make sure to go check that out virtually and RSVP if you want to come in person. We've also got our battle card building toolkit built by none other than Nico and our content marketing team, tapping on all of the internal expertise from the folks at Klue to help all of our customers build the best-in-class battle cards. Go check that out. And then we also have, if you're in the UK, Klue's World Tour is hitting London. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. Saw it on LinkedIn the other day.
There you go. It's hitting London. So go check that out as well if you want to meet some other folks and compete and other Klue customers. All right, for Compete Corner, you've been a busy guy today, Hunty.
Indeed.
What's been going on in your world as a guy at Klue, using Klue, running Compete?
Well, it's been a busy week, honestly. So I've been prepping for a few different things. The big one was on Wednesday, made a big executive summary presentation to our SLT. So every few weeks, I bring win-loss insights to our SLT, but this week in particular, it was the big roll-up. So what have we learned over the past quarter, actually more than the quarter at this point, and basically presenting big findings. So that was a lot of fun. We had great action items coming out of that. So again, big learning from this one was incorporating video into these conversations. So being able to actually share Here's exactly what our buyers said. Here's the context around the conversation. So much better than just putting quotes on a screen. So that's how the week started. Today was a bit of a different day than I was planning for. So one of our competitors, they announced a big
feature release.
Future Hunter here. I am not joined by Adam today. He is studying the ancient cuisine of raclette in the French Alps. So today I'm just gonna be sticking it alone. Okay, last Thursday, our competitor came out and dropped this new feature release. We have since refined our messaging, classic building in public. We've had the opportunity now to speak with our buyers, most importantly, and get their take on what the feature release looked like, what the value of this feature was, and this allowed us to actually update some of our positioning and messaging around this. So I'm not gonna get into the nitty-gritty details, but I did wanna share a little bit more about generally how we're thinking about positioning against this new feature release, all in the spirit of building in public. So at a very, very high level, what our competitor released and what Klue has been working on for the past few years, ultimately, we're really trying to solve the same problem, which is you've got a whole bunch of different types of competitive data. How do you find the insights in this data so that you can create the best competitive messaging, the best competitive content? In terms of our general positioning here, essentially what our competitor is doing really well is they're offering a lot of flexibility. So their ability to take a whole bunch of different types of data, put it into an LLM, very general purpose types of AI tooling here, and then be able to generate a summary of this data. So you could think, adding reviews, adding things like win-loss reports, adding blog posts into an AI prompt and generating a summary. Lots of flexibility there. Although where they may be sacrificing on is in terms of the precision, the accuracy, the reliability of the output. Where Klue has focused more is building purpose-built AI tools for extracting different types of insights from your data, depending on the use case, depending on the data type. So where we may be sacrificing a little bit more in terms of the flexibility of just being able to add any type of data into this AI prompt, we ultimately are more focused on the accuracy, the precision of these AI outputs. So at a very, very high level, that's kind of how we're thinking about this. So the way that we essentially approached speaking with buyers about this, the great thing about our community, the product marketing community, the competitive intelligence community, is that when things like this happen, product marketers, they pay attention to other releases. And so what we're very fortunate about is that a lot of product marketers pay attention to this type of release, and we can go and ask them and get their opinion. In some cases, we also had customers who are switching from that competitor over to Klue, who are sort of in that process right now, who have used this feature. They've also, of course, they're going through an evaluation cycle, so they've had the ability to see a lot of Klue's functionality as well. These people are phenomenal to speak with because they have exposure to both products and they can sort of talk about the general strengths and weaknesses of each one. What I learned is that coming up with positioning and messaging, there's a few different things in there, but one, it's difficult in some cases to come up with it really quickly. If you're looking to create accurate competitive positioning and messaging, things that you really feel like are gonna resonate with your buyers, it's not always something that you can put together really quickly. And you typically wanna get a lot of different eyes on it, a lot of different perspectives within the organization. But ultimately, it's gonna boil down to, what do you feel comfortable putting out to sellers right away? Ideally, you get in front of buyers and you have the opportunity to, one, get their take on how they see the differences between your approach and your competitor's approach. But also, once we'd put together what we felt was sort of our most compelling, our final draft of the messaging and positioning, we got it in front of a buyer and put it to the test. In some situations, maybe you don't have the opportunity to speak with a buyer. In a lot of cases, you're not going to have the opportunity to speak with someone who has used the product because it might be totally brand new. It might even not be fully launched by your competitor yet. And so you have to take those things into consideration. The best bet, I would say, is try and get in front of, some type of subject matter expert. That doesn't necessarily have to be a buyer who's evaluated both tools, but maybe try and get in front of a user of this type of solution and just get their take on it. I think that that's a really good starting approach, because even though you're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details, you can get a first impression from someone who might be, in the future evaluating these types of solutions. There's another thing that I'd add to this too, which is when you're creating your first draft of your messaging, don't get too attached to it. You should be fully expecting that this is going to get ripped to shreds. That is fine. Your job here is to come up with sort of the initial perspective and then make sure that you're getting the right voices into the room, the different perspectives, especially from your product team. They're probably the people who understand best what the technical strengths and weaknesses of different features can be and different approaches. So being able to translate those maybe technical reasons into more of the marketing messaging, the things that are more, a little bit simpler to digest, I would say, is kind of the key point here. But give yourself a little bit more time and communicate that. Let your team know, or the broader organization know, that this is something that you're going to be working on that might take, a day, it might take a few days, and maybe even try and give them some like very, very high level messaging, or at least a response that they can give to their customer in the meantime. Something like, hey, we've seen this, we're diving into it, curious to get your first impressions. If you have your customer success managers, your AEs who are sending that out, and if they get responses, maybe you end up getting that perspective from your own buyers. And that's something that can then feed into your messaging. So there's a few different things that I would think about if I could go back and do this again on Thursday. On the Coffee and Compete Pod, we are all about building in public. And that's exactly why we wanted to come back here and show what this actually looks like. Sometimes when you've got a competitor release that comes out, you don't have the advantage of time, the benefit of time, to be able to, really dig into all the different things that you wish that you wanted to create the perfect messaging right off the bat. Sometimes you build a first draft, you go back, you build a second draft, and as you learn more, as you speak to your buyers, you refine your messaging. And that's just how things go. That is the nature of working in competitive enablement. Thank you for coming along on this ride and seeing what kind of progress we've made over the past few days and what this experience was like from someone who's in the competitive enablement seat at the competitive enablement company. I hope that you have a chance to tune in to the next Coffee and Compete pod in 2 weeks and get an update on the situation. Thank you.